Hail, Lairsons. Welcome back to the Wyvern's Lair. I am Dungeon Master Wyvern, and in this episode of my Ultima Online podcast, I had the pleasure to talk about the highlights of Publish 2 for the New Legacy Seasonal Shard with New Legacy Community Legends, Slurms MacKenzie, and Nomilly. Publish 2 was released on April 10th, 2025, and brought with it new opportunities for us to forge our own legacies with the following features and events: the Vesper Antiquity Hunt, Family Heirlooms, and the Forsaken Bloodline. Join me now as we explore the highlights of Publish 2 for New Legacy. Welcome, Anne and Slurms. I'm excited for this conversation. We are here to discuss the highlights of Publish 2 for the New Legacy Shard of Ultima Online and look ahead to the promise of Season 2 for New Legacy. And I want to start with introductions, if you don't mind. So let's go around the table real quick and quickly introduce yourselves, a little bit about yourselves as a player, what brought you to New Legacy, and we'll keep it at that. So we'll throw it over to Slurms here. It's a New Legacy native like myself.
Hello, Internet populace and those who are choosing to listen. I am Slurms MacKenzie. I've played on and off UO, well, mostly off for the grand scheme of the, near 30 years that it's been running. But I played between about 99 and 2004. Enjoyed it a lot. High school, kind of dropped out of it in college. And after Age of Shadows kind of changed a lot of the stuff that my friends who started before me really liked. So it was harder to stay into it. Love UO still. Saw that they were coming out with a New Legacy idea. Gosh, it has to be like 5 years ago or 6 years ago, whenever the first rumblings of it. And that kind of piqued my interest and my friend group's interest. So when I saw that it actually went live, I was like, hey, let's give this a shot. Restarted my account when I realized the limitations, which it's still awesome to be able to log in. So I love that endless journey option. But I realized that there were limitations to it. So paying again, I am right now. So definitely has me hooked. I like New Legacy. I'm not sure that I'll ever go back to true production shards. I like the idea of seasonal. I like it with Diablo 4. I like it with, Diablos and Path of Exile and stuff like that. So I like the idea of being able to change it up, give something new, be able to be creative with the design template versus trying to keep a continuous and ever-flowing river of stuff like you would have to do on production. So that's kind of what has me here. That's what I like, and that's my background with Ultima and why I'm back.
Slurms, you've been a great voice for the New Legacy community, liaison ambassador, and I'm glad that you made the time this Sunday to join us for this conversation. So welcome. And over to Anne, an Ultima Online legend.
Oh, I don't know about that. Death Row legend, perhaps. Anne Nomilly. I've been in Ultima Online since about 2000. I actually set foot in the game for the first time just to shut up a guy at work. He would come in and just blab about this game, and I was like, okay, let me see what this is all about. So jumped in, and I've never jumped out. It's been a lot of fun over the years. Over on Catskills, which is our home shard, we created a Friday night hunt group that's kind of an umbrella for multiple guilds, multiple players. It's everybody's welcome. Everybody come. Doesn't matter what you do the rest of the time. Come with a good attitude. Come to have fun. Come to die. A lot of death. A lot of death. It's the motto of the Friday night hunt group is if you ain't dying, you ain't trying. So, there's that.
Did you? Oh, go ahead, please.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, when New Legacy came out, we were intrigued and more intrigued by the community aspect of it. That's something that we're really involved in, is making sure that anybody can play and that anybody can access content. A lot of single players, they can't do some of the harder content. So that's kind of how Friday nights began, was opening up content to everybody. And so when New Legacy came out, it's like, well, let's take a look and see what we can do as a group. What do we need to depend on each other for? And so that's kind of how that spun out.
Got you. I do have a question for you. So you had this colleague of yours who was, ranting about Ultima Online at work. Did you have a background in MMOs prior to stepping foot into Ultima Online or games in general?
Not a bit. Never touched one. And Ultima Online is the only game I've ever played. I tried World of Warcraft and I died repeatedly because I couldn't do anything but look at my feet. I couldn't figure out how to move. So it's been UO all the way for me.
Got you.
That's my only introduction, and I'll be here till they shut the servers down.
Well, it means so much to me that someone like yourself, who has been an important hub for the player community, whether it's on Catskills or here on New Legacy, together with your fellow officer Kaz, someone who's tied together players and created a fun platform and community for them to experience Ultima Online. So thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, Anne. Myself,
Absolutely. I do want to say one thing, just real quick.
Of course.
I'm kind of the face of it because I have the loudest mouth, but none of what we do would happen without all of the people that pitch in. It is a group community effort, and I just want to shout out to all of the Friday Night Hunt group. It's amazing the people that have joined us on Friday nights that contribute, that really engage with us. So they're the heart of it.
Well said, and I wouldn't think of anything else that someone like yourself, a leader like yourself, would say about your guild and the people that help give life to the Friday Night Hunt community. And so with that, we're going to move over to Publish 2 for New Legacy. So as you all know, who have been part of the Season 1 journey, New Legacy launched around the fall of last year. Initially, we had a legendary foe system to keep ourselves engaged for several months. Publish 1 came into effect with some important quality of life changes, most especially the legendary artifact trader that was tied to the legendary foe system. And then towards the latter part of spring this year, the good developers at Broadsword launched Publish 2, which brought 3 very important events or systems to the first season of New Legacy, chiefly the Vesper Antiquity Hunt, Family Heirlooms, and the Forsaken Bloodline. So I'd like to take a little moment and just check in with you both about some of the highlights for Publish 2 for yourselves. What have been some of the most memorable features that you've enjoyed pursuing as part of Publish 2?
For myself, I really liked Blackthorns. Having a different thing to do that kind of breaks up the monotony of just the regular hunt of the legendary foes, I think has been fantastic. I think that overall the development and design from someone who's not played production, I didn't realize that it was an area that had already been made. So it was like brand new to me, and I thought it was really cool. The bosses are really, really cool. Overall, I think that it kind of brought life back into a system that we kind of, I don't know how to say, became a little stagnant just because of the everyday, okay, you're going to run Titan, you're going to run Icemancer, so on and so forth.
So you're talking about the legendary foes here.
Yeah, the legendary foes. Yes. So you're going to run and you're going to kill these, and there wasn't much else to do.
Assuming that, let's all assume as we go through this conversation that people who may be listening to this might not be readily familiar with New Legacy or even Ultima Online. So we can be a little deliberate here. So when we speak about the legendary foes, we're talking about 5 boss events that you can experience as a player here. So that consists of the Manticores, Icemancer, Velara, the Solan Matriarch, and
the Crimson Dragon.
The Crimson Dragon, the apex of them all. And so when the Shard launched several months ago, that was really all that players really had to do. There was nothing else. So we were running a circuit of these 5 bosses for several months. This is what Slurms is talking about, the narrowing and limitations of the initial experience. Back over to you.
Yeah. So I like that it added. It showed that they were interested in creating new things, bringing new things into the foray, making sure that we had the ability to kind of explore out and do more than just, a singular task. So I found that really, really good. And I wish they were a little bit easier. They definitely made it a challenge, because it's not something that you can just do with like 2 people, or I've not been successful. Maybe if I was better, you could do it with fewer people. But it definitely brings the community together. And I like that design and that development kind of aspect to it. So overall, that's been what I liked about it. New stuff, entertaining to do, and it just really kept me entertained. I've not delved into, you know, trying to min-max a character besides, getting my Acidrials, which are also a Pub 2 thing, which I have absolutely loved. Those have made my life so much better. So, but BT primarily, which the Acidrials come from it, which is a Draco Lich, which has been awesome.
So for those of you listening who may be wondering what Blackthorns is, I'll toss this over to you shortly, Annie. But Blackthorns essentially it's the Forsaken Bloodline event for Publish 2. They have taken Blackthorn's dungeon from production, and they have revamped it to essentially localize it uniquely for New Legacy. So the premise is that the heir of the Forsaken Bloodline, Victor Blackthorn, has kind of laid claim to Blackthorn's dungeon, and he populated it with his henchmen. So it consists of Dreadguards, which are mini bosses that belong to 4 wings of the dungeon that you were initially able to access. You had to defeat all the Dreadguards across these wings to unlock the second part of the dungeon, which is guarded by the Exarchs, which are the major bosses that you must defeat in order to clear the dungeon, if you will. Now, if you fail to clear the dungeon or choose not to, the dungeon remains in its state even after the shard resets. So it only officially kind of resets, if you will, once players here in the New Legacy community are able to clear it once and for all, which is a unique feature for the Forsaken Bloodline dungeon. It is, as Parallax, the content designer, expressed, his vision for it was to introduce a raid-style dungeon from other MMOs to New Legacy through the Forsaken Bloodline dungeon. Now over to you, Annie.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Slurms. That has been a lot of fun this time. It gave something different to do. The legendary foes, like you said, that was just starting to feel a little grindy, I guess. There wasn't a lot else to do. So the Blackthorns dungeon is a huge popular hunt on production. As a matter of fact, the Friday Night Hunt does it the first Friday of every month. But it really on production is just the pods, as we call them, which is where the Exarchs are on New Legacy. So it's been really fun to see the entire dungeon used and brought back to life. That's been a lot of fun. Another thing that I've really enjoyed is the treasure hunting and the fact that you don't have to have a complete new set of skills to go dig up treasure chests now. You can do it on any character. You just need the tools to do it. So again, it's that sense of community. You need crafters and people to make you the tools, but then you can go out and dig. So I think on New Legacy, you are very much more dependent on each other. And so I really enjoy seeing those things that they put in that kind of foster that, you can't fit everything just on one character. You have to depend on someone else. And then, you can go out in a group. The fact that Blackthorns is so challenging, especially those 4 pods, as I refer to them, those are, I can't do them solo or even two either. I just run in and die and figure they'll trip over my corpse and we're good.
You actually touched on something really important, and that I think that is laudable, that Chironics and Parallax have attempted with New Legacy as far as the design and system of the shard experience, and that is encouraging more interdependence between players, and that's expressed exactly as you put it. We are limited to 2 characters per account on New Legacy, and obviously there are players out there who have multiple subscribed accounts. Myself, I'm not one of them. I just have the one, and it forces me to make important choices about how I use my limited character slots. So, for example, I have my PVM character here, which is a warrior tamer. My second slot is with a crafter that I never quite completed, but it is there to help me occasionally with my armor repairs. But that does mean that, the developers kind of encouraged me to reach out to guildmates or get into general and see if I could get something from another player in the way of assistance. And I think when it comes to a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, you do want to find ways of encouraging just, organic socialization between players. And so for them to be trying to find ways of encouraging that through New Legacy, I think that's definitely something that I've enjoyed. Returning to Blackthorns for a moment, to the Forsaken Bloodline dungeon, let's talk about the Dread Guards. Which Dread Guards stood out to you folks as most entertaining or memorable, for that matter? We're going to leave the Exarchs to one side of the conversation for the moment.
I like the bag ball guy. That's just, to me, being able to pick up and throw bag balls. And he what's the word I'm looking for? He chatters at you.
They all do.
Yeah, but I don't know. He just tickles me for some reason. I think him and the wine elemental, because I'm a fan of wine, gotta admit.
Yeah, Kragor, who is the bag ball Dread Guard. So for those who are listening, some of the Dread Guards have very specific, unique mechanics. So Kragor is in sort of the northern wing of the dungeon, and you can't really damage him through spells and weapons. I mean, you could, but it would take forever to defeat him. So what Kragor does is that throughout the fight, he'll throw out these bag balls that Annie was saying. You could actually pick that up, put it in your inventory, and then fling it back to Kragor to actually damage him. And in the midst of this, while you're doing this, where you're fighting Kragor, you were being swarmed by his henchmen. So it's a really busy, fun, hectic encounter. And the wine, what's the exact? Do you remember the exact name of that Dread Guard, Slurms? It's not the Wine Lord.
I mean, it's the wine elemental.
The wine elemental. There you go. Yeah. So one of the funny things about the wine elemental is that if you actually sort of get into proximity to it during the fight, you get drunk. Your character gets drunk. So throughout the rest of the dungeon for days. So you could be running throughout the dungeon and suddenly you're peeling off your clothing, your armor, you're dropping your weapons, you're singing, you're having a grand old drunk time. So the wine elemental is definitely memorable for that mechanic. Yeah, I agree. Those are two great standouts. And what about yourself, Slurms?
I like the wine elemental personally. I think it's hilarious. The fact that it kind of generates the faux pas of when you get drunk, you do silly stuff, and one of the things that it has you do is it strips your armor off. Which I find hilarious because you're like, because I remember the first time I was like, when did I take off my pants? Like, I don't, like, what? Like, and like something happened. Man, I don't remember this. And then the next time we fought him, it happened again. I was like, oh, it's this silly mob, So it's just the cuteness of that, like, awareness that, I didn't know that this was it was this that caused that. And the realization, I'm like, oh yeah, that tracks. That makes sense. So I did like that quite a bit.
Mm.
Seeing that.
Which Dread Guards do you not like fighting?
Dreadguard itself, I like the Blizzard Elemental because of what it drops. I do not like the Blizzard Elemental because of it really is one of those ones where you cannot do that without a well-organized group. You really do have to have a well-organized group in order to be successful with it.
What makes the Blizzard Elemental so challenging? Because I barely understand the mechanics of the dungeon.
So the Blizzard Elemental, the Blizzard Elemental, it puts a stacking debuff on you that the longer that you are standing within range, that you take more Frostbite. Think about it that I'm outside the cold, and the longer that I am there, the colder I'm going to get, and eventually,
freeze
to
death.
You'll freeze to death. So it's a absolutely beautiful representation of that. But oh my gosh, it is so difficult to deal with because you're like, oh, if I move and I'm warming up a little bit or something like this, oh, this is going to help make sure that I live. No, that's not how it works at all. It definitely makes sure that you are out of range, doing all sorts of other stuff, and letting the stacks fall off. So that can be kind of difficult, along with Blizzard Elementals and stuff spawning and coming after you too.
Right.
It's a really fun fight, but I will say that of the Dread Guards, it's probably one of the more difficult ones to kind of handle and deal with.
Gotcha.
I think mine is the Goldsmith. That one, I die to that one almost every single time. If I live through the others, that one kills me. With all of the elementals and the additional mobs that spawns, and then throwing treasure sand at you and turning you gold, which is kind of cool. I mean, my pets look very nice gold hued, but that one gets me every time. There's just something about the mechanics of that one that I don't do well. That's my least favorite.
Yeah, I actually kind of agree with you, Ann. I think I'm pretty good with most of the Dread Guards. I dread the that particular wing with Aram and Midas and those folks. From what I understand, and Slurms, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that encounter is easier with the less gold you have in your inventory. Is that correct? Is there some sort of do they do more damage, or is their debuffs
it's
more impactful?
So it's not, from my understanding, it's not that it's the gold in your bag. It's the it's that they'll send you fake gold, the gold sand, which always looks like gold. The fake sand, and that puts you overweight, so you can't run away from the swarm. So
and you need to get rid of that quick, and sometimes that's hard because you can't find a square tile to set it down. So it's I that's a mess.
And they have this occasional shower of coins that does a great deal of damage, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that really kicks my ass every time.
Yep.
I agree. I dread those Dread Guards, and as you do. And the Blizzard Elemental Slurms, definitely, it's one that I'm cautious around, but I find that if I have a player or a guildmate that's good at cross healing, I can usually cross heal through the damage, even if I'm right up front with myself and my pet. But definitely a challenging Dread Guard. All right, we're going to switch over to the Exarchs now, the mighty major bosses of the dungeon. Which ones do you enjoy fighting?
Meatball. I don't know his muscle name because but he's just he reminds me of just a nice big punching bag that has some really unique mechanics, and it'll definitely kill you if you're not paying attention, but it's just a good skill check, and I just enjoy a good skill check in a game. It's not necessarily that it's a hard fight, but it's if you don't do this right, you will die fight.
Yeah, you definitely have to pay attention to that one. I feel like that's the one I have the best chance of surviving. I agree. I think it's a challenge. You need to pay attention, watch what you're doing, watch your health, watch when it throws the
Avoid pools.
energy bombs,
Right.
void pools at you. But as long as you're watching, you can survive that one. It's just a good outfight. I agree.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're all referring to Volithar, the Void Mob, but the New Legacy community knows it better as Floating Meatball. And in fact, one of the drops from Volithar is marinara sauce. So the developers are kind of in that joke with how it presents to players. But I agree with you both. I think I enjoy fighting Volithar, and I think the reason why I do so is because it's a challenging fight, but there's enough in the way of cues for me to be able to sort of, hopefully survive that fight without earning too many death robes. So it's one of the easier Exarch fights, in my opinion. I think it's interesting that none of you really were like, yeah, it's the Void Maw, he's easy. I really like the Gnarled Veil Keeper, and I think it's just sort of, yeah, they're all really challenging. So let's go over to the Exarchs you don't enjoy facing off of, and what about them terrifies you or makes you collect an unreasonable amount of death robes.
All of the rest of them.
All the rest.
They've each got, the Riftborn is not hard, except for the overwhelming amount of little riftlings. And I know I'm butchering the names of them, but
the Maulings.
The Maulings, they stand block so bad that you can't get out. That's a challenge. I
honestly, if I'm running through the dungeon and it's a pug group, pickup group, and if we're if we're not like a large war band, and I'm not confident in our ability to coordinate, I skip that Exarch, because for the exact reason you pointed out, it turns into a bloodbath. It just becomes miserable real fast. So I prefer to take on that Exarch with guildmates who know what they're doing, or more experienced players who clearly have done the dungeon several times and know how to defeat that, because that actually, in my opinion, that can be the most frustrating Exarch to deal with, even beyond Rift.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's the frustration of just, if you're not coordinated, if you're not paying attention, working together with tactics. We joke at the Friday night hunt that on Friday nights tactics go out the window. But in things like New Legacy, you have to have tactics to survive it and get out of it. So I would agree with that.
That's so interesting for me to hear from you, Anne. So is this like has this been a change for veteran players like yourself to face off against content that really requires strategy and tactics, as compared to stuff in the past?
No, when I say that, Friday nights are about unwinding from the week and having fun and dying and laughing. And when you have that many groups that don't play together normally, tactics do kind of go out the window because everybody's got a different play style. Our home group, if you will, the group that we play with during the week, we definitely figure out tactics and, work as a group and do that. So it's just, Friday nights are just a different dynamic all on their own. When it comes to that, one example is the Exodus encounter. People will, the tactic is to put him down in the pit and shoot him with ranged weapons. On Friday night, we just fight him in the middle of the dungeon wherever he is, and everybody dies. And, it's just kind of a bloodbath, but
Gotcha.
It's interesting.
Gotcha. You Slurms.
For the most disliked, probably Mauling. After they retweaked the dungeon, I think it's just the one fight that just got overtuned. I think I think that it's not a problem of like, oh, this is a hard fight, or that it's too difficult in that sense. I think it's purely this is a fight that's just not tuned correctly, not there for the player necessarily to be able to succeed, because it spams out too much without consistency of how many players might actually be in the event. There's some other things where like it'll change the dynamic, or the stuff isn't as bad when there's fewer players in the event. Like Manticore kind of goes crazy, which is a multi-stage fight. I think one of the best fights in all of New Legacy, which I didn't know wasn't on production. I think that's one of the best fights that they created. I think that multi-stage fight where there's different things, that kind of goes off the rails when you have more people, because there's more stuff happening. It spawns. I highly recommend anyone who's listening to this, if there's a recording, if Wyvern or DM Wyvern has a video, I recommend looking at the Manticore fight. Great strategic fight. And it really goes off the rails when there's a ton of people there. But you can also do it with like 5 people who know what they're doing, and it's kind of toned down, and it's not as crazy, and it's much more.
Or one Garrett, but it will take him 2 hours.
Yeah, one person, and you're really going for it. Versus like mauling, you're not soloing that post patch. After they did the update, it's just going to spawn too many maulings. You're not going to have enough damage. You can't wrangle it. And I've seen groups of like 15 people in there struggle because of the amount of maulings that will spawn. And I mean, I'm on the web client, and so it's pretty stable. But if you're on like you're like the old original client, I could imagine that it could like crash or something like that, just because the amount of mobs that end up on screen. So there's just a lot of dynamics about that. Like, I'd rather the maulings be stronger than numerous. Like, okay, so you want it to be tougher. You don't want them to die to like 5 ticks of a fire field because you want everyone to spawn a fire field. Okay, but if people aren't spawning fire fields, it just becomes so much of a hassle that you can't move. It becomes just such a frustration of a fight. It's not that it's a difficult fight. It's more of that it's becoming frustrating just for frustration's sake. And so I think, well, overall, it's a good concept. I like the idea of, hey, you can't kill this boss until you've killed its clone. It's a little parasite that spawns off its clones.
Yeah.
And if you keep attacking the main boss will keep spawning maulings, even though you can't kill it. But then when you have the 2 clones up and the main mauling and everyone's attacking, it's just, with the adjustment that they made in order to make it a little bit more difficult, they should have upped the damage that the maulings did, or upped the life that the maulings had, and not increased the spawn rate at which the maulings spawn, because it's a rough fight on purely logistic standpoint.
Or just scale the spawn rate to the number of players in the encounter, because whether it's 1 or 30, it's just an overwhelming mass of ads that becomes unmanageable to deal with and unfun.
So that's one where, I know we're going to talk about the next season. I think that's definitely a mechanic in boss style that I would not want to see moving forward. And even honestly, I'd prefer them to scale it down, or make the mauling changes, make them more difficult, but reduce the spawn so that I can move, so that I can actually play my character. It's the one fight where I do not feel I can truly play my character in the game.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. And I think, when you throw that many mobs and then you throw stand blocking in on top of it, it just becomes an exercise in, why am I even in this room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I also kind of have that same sort of impression that you do. It just becomes really an overwhelming experience for me as a player. I can't even make my way to the void clones. There's just this wall of maulings in front of me, even if I'm doing AoE attacks to, hew down the ads around me. It just doesn't seem like I can make any headway. It becomes like this impossible wall of ads to move through. So I'm in agreement with both you and Slurms here that if there's one Exarch that I think was that might need a second look at by Parallax, that would be the one. I mean, on paper, I think it's a brilliant idea. I love the idea of a fight where you're having to contend with a great massive ads, and that's a trope that you see in a lot of MMOs. But I do think it could use some adjustment to make it more fun and less frustrating, and that's kind of where you want to be in terms of like, I think the design of any given encounter. for your players, right? Because I feel like with the Gnarled Veilkeeper and the Rift Taker, they're, I mean, I have picked up my share of death robes from both of those exarchs over the course of published two. But I really feel like I've earned my death robes for those encounters, and I never feel like,
Yeah.
I feel like I deserved each death robe I got.
With both of those, I actually consider those the two best designed fights in the entire dungeon when it comes to um how you play, where you will avoid death if you know what you're doing. So the more you play it, the better you'll get, the less you'll die.
Yeah.
You understand the rotation of the fire for Riftbreaker. You understand for the Veilkeeper, the clones that they spawn. You kill those and you move away from his AoE. As you play more, you get better, and as the term goes for the Dark Souls people, you get good, and then you stop dying and you just play through. The only thing with the maulings and stuff is you can't. It's the one where it stops you from being able to play your character, and I think that that's just a design flaw. I don't think it's a bad encounter from itself, from the concept point. As you said, I like that the main boss, if you keep attacking it, it's going to keep spawning maulings. I think that's fantastic. It teaches people to pull off and not attack the main one until the clones are dead. But sometimes you just cannot get to the clone. Like I can't.
Right.
I can't do the encounter. So that's one where I would, if there is a dev that ever listens to this, or there's someone from another game that's doing stuff, don't prevent your characters from being able to play the game that you've created.
Right.
Yes, you can make stuff incredibly difficult, but don't prevent them just by basis of the game mechanics from preventing the player from just actually playing the game. That's a big negative, and I think that that's one of the big faults of that. But I will say that before the patch, apparently it was just way too easy.
Yeah.
Like it was a joke. I did not get into the dungeon because I was out of town until after they had buffed it, so I can't speak to that. However, I will say that it got overtuned, and I think that it's kind of been a little bit, I don't want to say ignored, but they've kind of been like, it will get fixed when it gets fixed. Hopefully, because they have to have seen the people that have talked about it.
Oh, I will tell you something interesting. That at least I think it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen the current publish that's on production.
120
the side
looks
stages.
majestic. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But at the end, before it resets, you get kicked out of the dungeon. When it resets, you have to break the walls down. It's very similar to in Blackthorn's A New Legacy, where you have to defeat a certain number of bosses. I think there's 8 of them. And then you get a random major boss. In that fight, it's actually one of the Exarch mechanics. And believe it or not, for that fight, the Maulings is my favorite fight of the ones that spawn. It's toned down. You can move around. You can play your character. It's a good fight. You'll still die, but you have a chance.
I have not played production, so I love that. I love that that's they saw what was happening and they adjusted.
Yeah,
that's very cool, man.
Yeah, it's a neat fight. They have the Veilkeeper. They have the only one they don't have. I haven't seen it is the meatballs mechanic. I haven't seen that one. They may have it. I just haven't seen it.
Gotcha. To your point, to both of you here, Anne and Slurms, about having an opportunity to learn the encounter and get good at it, and that being sort of indication of good game design as well. You kind of want that player to have that satisfaction of mastery over the content. I'll never forget day one of the Forsaken Bloodline dungeon when the New Legacy community was fighting the Void Maw Vorlithar, aka the Meatball. At that time, very few of us understood the mechanics, and when the second stage ticked over and Vorlithar began, sending out those void pools, the entire screen went into gray death robes. It was hilarious. It's the entire everyone was running around in death robes. Like I'd never seen anything like that before or since. So we wisened up to to the ways of the Void Maw. But great shout. Thank you so much for your feedback on the Exarchs. And with that, we will breeze through to the Vesper Antiquity Hunt. Thoughts there? Oh, wait, actually, I do have to go back one take before we move over to the Antiquity Hunt. I do have a question about the Forsaken Bloodline Dungeon and how it was unlocked for New Legacy. So, for those of you who may be listening to this when the Publish 2 was launched on New Legacy, the dungeon was sealed off to the players for a number of weeks, and the entire Shard community had to well, not coordinate, but could contribute to the unlocking of the dungeon by taking on various legendary foes and, most controversially, champion spawns to obtain the essences required to unlock the dungeon. So, for a number of weeks, this is what the Shard community was doing. We were running legendary foes, we were running champion spawns to obtain the essences. A handful of players began to contest the champion spawns. And the rest of the Shard community, for a moment, was taken aback, realizing that, PvP had sort of player versus player activity had kind of, come back to, or had arrived to New Legacy. So that was a surprise to a lot of players accustomed to a Trammel non-PvP style of play. And it out of that emerged some great sort of organic player activity and self-organization. It was interesting. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts about how the unlock to the dungeon was handled and whether you'd want to see that again or changes made to that approach.
I think overall, I think it was handled well, all except the champion spawns.
Okay.
Similarly, a big developer, I'm sure everyone has seen Dune or heard of Dune at this point, and just how well it's been doing, and like the fandom. They made a very similar mistake. They forced PvP onto a PvM system, and it had such backlash that they had to pull it and redo stuff very, very quickly. Because people want a PvM and they want a PvP and they want to be able to do their thing without being
forced so
to say. Yeah. So overall, I think that while the system overall was great, forcing PvMers into PvP situations was not great. I think that it was a good learning experience, and I think that hopefully Parallax and the people at UO saw the backlash that Dune got and were like, oh, that's why. And, they won't do it again, kind of thing. It's not necessarily a negative to experiment with stuff, but it just kind of made me chuckle. Like, I was railing against this, and the people who were like, I want to go and PvP. You're not PvPing on New Legacy. There's harassing on New Legacy.
And that I think is it right there, that statement, harassing, that's the difference. PvPing, player versus player, when it's done respectfully, and I've seen some very respectful PvPers that they just want to fight, and that's fair. But it's the ones that they smack talk, they harass, they're not doing it for the fight, they're just doing it to harass. That's what gets everybody turned off.
Yeah. And with that, there was, and the reason why I say the PvP stuff is because the people were taking over the spawns, and there was a group specifically dedicated to prevent the dungeon from opening. And that's just not cool, which then mobilized everyone being like, all right, we got to do something because we're PvMers. We need to approach this so that we can actually PvM.
Yeah, and shout out to Friday Night Hunt for working with my very small player community to help organize that side of the shard and contest the champion spawns. That was fun.
Yeah.
And actually, a huge shout out as part of that to Pitter, for, he was really instrumental from the Friday Night Hunt side of things in voicing that and, trying to pull people together too. That was a good outcome of it, but it frustrated a lot of people unnecessarily, I think.
Would
My friends actually quit because of that. He's like, I'm
Yep.
done. He's like, this is stupid. He's like, if this is the way that they're gonna take this, like, it's an experiment, have fun with it, but not my game. And I've only gotten to log back in like once. He let his account deactivate. He doesn't have his house anymore. He's just like, maybe next season, but he's like, I can't, I don't want this.
So, Anne,
Which is understandable.
So, Anne, do you think it would be better if next time around, if there was like some sort of key piece of content related to a future publish to, obviously you could find a way to involve the shard community as the developers did for the Forsaken Bloodline Dungeon Unlock, but do you think it would be prudent for them to steer clear of forcing players into PVM players into a PvP scenario for themselves?
I think so, and I think one of the things that they underutilized, when New Legacy first came out, you had the Quaderact encounter, but you also had an encounter that I don't think many people did. We did it one night as a guild, and it was hysterical.
It was
But
fun.
it was kind of a King of the Mountain type
Dungeon
thing. Go
Outpost,
into
yeah.
this encounter. Yeah, the Dungeon Outpost. I think they really need to do something with that mechanic, PvPers, for people who want to PvP, because you really didn't lose anything. At the end of time, you came out with all your stuff. It was just for fun and for the fight. And so for people who say, I want a PvP for the fight, I want to test that excitement, that player versus player, that it's truly about the fight, they really should concentrate more on that and not tie opening a big part of content to the ability for people to grief it.
Mhm.
And, like Slurms said, the thing is these people were just trying to prevent the opening of the dungeon. It wasn't for the fight. It wasn't for the fun. It wasn't for the community. It was to grief. And that's what loses the players. So I think there's room for PvP. It can bring some excitement. I can't do it good at all. I can't PvP my way out of a wet paper bag with both ends cut off.
Same. I know how to run from a fight.
Yeah, exactly. But I'll hop in there and take a pot shot and lay down and die. It does get the blood pumping, but it needs to be done in a way that's fun, that's not annoying and turns people off from the game. And like Storm said, with one of his friends who logged off, well, you've lost a part of the community that they could have really enjoyed the game.
Right.
So.
I'm all for PvP, but I think that what MMO designers have discovered since the days of Ultima Online's launch and its anarchic sandbox is that MMOs tend to thrive and communities tend to thrive when they can consent to their experience, right? So consensual PvP is something that has been proven to be successful, right? You log into a game like Overwatch because you're going to be fighting against other players. You join a battleground in World of Warcraft, once again, you with full awareness of what that experience is going to be. And champion spawns exist. They've been a part of the game for quite some time. They incentivize players to take on a certain amount of risk. And I don't think that they should be neglected here on New Legacy. I think there's ways you can continue to incentivize players to, step into a champion spawn. You can tie, champion spawns to drops that you can't get really anywhere else, for example. And that would certainly...
They really kind of did that up until they put in the
Traders.
point system.
Right. Yeah.
The only way you could get the undead book was by doing Nira.
Right.
I think that was good to give you, now you can get it by doing the foes now, but it takes longer. You have a chance of getting it quicker by still doing near. So you have a choice. You
Right.
can choose your path.
Correct.
And I like that. I love that they did that.
Yeah. And to your point about the dungeon outpost system, and I think it has so much potential. I along with some others, including Garrett, who obviously loves player versus player, combat and Ultima Online. We offered some notes to Parallax about where they could take the dungeon outpost system moving forward. But I do think it has a lot of potential. I do think it was underutilized in the first season. I think Parallax and Chironics are aware of that. There was talk of a future PvP trader similar to the legendary artifact trader. So that could be something that could show up in season 2. There were significant problems with the dungeon outpost system. Durability was a problem. Even if it was fun in games and you're fighting in the dungeon outpost, you still take durability damage. So players need to be aware of that potential cost to participating in that system. Would be good to see durability taken away once again, to make it a very sort of low cost fun activity for people to take part in. The second issue that we were running into is that tamers were having trouble with some of their pets being lost in the dungeon once they reported out. And in one case, one of our players from the Wyvern's Lair lost one of their pets altogether. So if you could imagine losing a crimson and an ember wing in the dungeon, how heartbreaking that would be, given the effort that goes into acquiring a pet like that. So there were some serious technical issues that I'm hoping that when the developers have time, they can take a look at that and fix that for season 2.
Yeah, that would be good. We did it the one night and we were just laughing ourselves silly, but
So good.
we only did it the once, so it was like we never really did it again, but we're like, wow, this could be good. And I mean, it could give people a chance to dip their toes into PvP and see if they like it. We actually had a couple of people that went, hey, this could be fun. Maybe I need to learn to get better at PvP.
So the one thing I will say, just to interrupt, because the problem is the 2 character limit though with the PvP aspect itself.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big drawbacks of the new legacy system is, I want to PvP, and then go, I have my PVMer and I have a crafter. I don't have a character that's built for PvP. That is the big issue in general that I see with it. And if they opened up a third slot so you could make like a PvPer in order to do those kind of events and stuff, I think it would be a much bigger success overall for people to be able to jump in and do those events. Because I've been advocating for like bag ball, capture the flag, general melee, last man standing. All of those are great PvP ones that exist that you can that could be implemented into a system that other Overwatch and stuff have done, or Team Fortress 2 and stuff like that have been for ages, have done successfully, and you could implement those, and I think it would just be a blast for people. So I want to see that kind of PvP.
And I think that's a really good point, Slurms. Even on production, they'll tell you characters templates that are built for PVM and characters and templates that are built for PvP, they're very different templates. And that's why when you see a group come in to raid a spawn, the PvPers will come in first, but they bring in their PVMers to finish the spawn, because the 2 templates, if you're built for PVM, you're not good at PvP. And if you're built for PvP, honestly, you're not great at PVM. So I think that's a really good point to bring out there.
Well said, Slurms, and thank you for that insight, Anne, onto what Slurms was sharing about a potential issue there with the character slot limitation. But then again, it is the developers asking you to make choices about how you want to play. The issue there, I think, is the fact that there is a huge there isn't a PvP scene here on New Legacy, so PvP characters are basically a very valuable PVM slot thrown away currently. So possibly in season 2, if there is a more satisfying way for players to engage in PvP, they can make that choice with one of their two precious character slots. here on New Legacy. We are 1 hour, and we just covered a little bit of the Forsaken Bloodline dungeon. Could we extend by 30 minutes to complete the conversation here with your permission?
Oh, I had planned for 2 hours, so.
Oh,
yeah.
great. Okay. Anne, is that
I
okay
could
with
take
you?
a bit longer.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, let's this is going to be an open floor now for the next two major features published too. The Vesper Antiquity Hunt or Family Heirlooms. And they're kind of almost like the same thing tied together. So thoughts, opinions, things that you liked about them or may not have liked about these two systems.
I think that they're just great. I wish the heirlooms were a little bit more common. But it does seem like the way to get them is really through the treasure maps, and I just haven't delved into the treasure maps. People are saying that about every treasure or every about 10 treasure maps that you do, or 20 treasure maps, that you end up getting an heirloom. So I just haven't done enough. So, but yeah, I think that's just absolutely fantastic with that aspect.
The one heirloom that I actually got in Blackthorns.
Oh,
In the not the excerpts. What were the other ones?
Dreadguards.
The Dreadguards. I actually got one from the Dreadguards. And I think it's just too cool.
What'd you get?
I got the heirloom armor,
Nice.
House Lefay.
Oh, hey, congratulations.
Yeah. So that is definitely being safely stored away. My problem with the antiquities is I like them all. I don't want to turn them in. I don't want to keep them, but I am a legendary hoarder, so there is.
Aren't we all? If you're playing Ultima Online, you're usually a hoarder at heart.
Yes.
Some sort.
Yes. Yeah, I love the antiquities. The colors, the names. I think they've been really fun. I haven't done as much of those as I would like, just because I'm always getting ready to go out and dig up treasure chests, and then somebody goes, "Oh, this legendary foe is up!" Squirrel, off we go. To do that.
I will say that I think the way they've handled family heirlooms is brilliant. So the whole premise, well, one of the big premises for New Legacy is that you as a player will be able to build a legacy from season to season here on this unique shard. And so for a long time, we were asking ourselves, well, what does that look like? And the developers to introduce several unique quote unquote heirlooms that actually sort of say something about your house, right? So when you create a character here in your legacy, you have to choose a house name. Mine is Wormwrath. Yours is what again, Anne?
It's Lefay.
Lefay. And Slurms, what's your house name?
Sloth.
Slurms, MacKenzie Sloth.
Love it.
I love it. So I think that they've arrived at like a fun sort of approach to that for players. Ultima Online is not a vertical MMO like EverQuest, where there's this constant progression of player power through gear, right? And levels. It is a horizontal MMO experience where, progression gets you to a certain point as far as your player experience, but really, the one of the strongest sort of player motivations in Ultima goes back to what Anne was saying, is just collecting things that you can then use in your player home, which again was one of the cornerstones that made Ultima Online unique amongst the pantheon of MMOs for so very long, and is still one of the anchors that arguably powers and sustains the current player community, is this idea of having a piece of the virtual world that you call your own through your player home that you then decorate with the things that you find. So what I found most clever about Publish 2 is that to get your family heirlooms, you need to use treasure maps. To get treasure maps, you need to do the legendary foes or the dread guards or exarchs. That's the only, well, let me correct myself. It is the way to get the most powerful treasure map, the trove map that, has the greatest chance of giving you antiquities or maybe your family heirloom. I don't know, what your success rate might be with some of the smaller maps, but certainly trove maps give you that chance. So while you pursue your family heirlooms, you're able to take part in the Vesper Antiquity Hunt, which itself gives you unique rewards through the Vesper Antiquity Trader. So it's a really, really nice circle there. The other thing that I really enjoyed about the Vesper Antiquity Hunt, and that I hope we see more of in future publishes for New Legacy, is reasons for players to explore the world. I, as a new player to Ultima Online, arguably, really had such a narrow lens of what the New Legacy game world was for several months, because all I would really use is my rune book to go from legendary foe to legendary foe as they would come up during the rotation. I had no reason to really venture out past that or some of the dungeons that the current season offers. Now, with the treasure maps, I suddenly had a compelling reason to go to all corners of the game world and explore and see different points of interest or discover more of the features of the game world itself. That's been very satisfying to me. And I would love to see the developers kind of double down in future seasons to motivate players to get off the beaten path and explore more of the game world and be rewarded for it as they are currently through the Vesper Antiquity Hunt.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd also like to see, as you're exploring, that you come across unique formations or, just it can be something static. It doesn't have to be anything, wow, it gives you some boost, but, just something interesting to look at. Oh, I just discovered this. Isn't that, I can walk through this reflecting pool. Just some different artwork and things to give you a reason, while you're out there digging, to stop and take a minute and look around.
What would you think, Anne, if we could actually earn unique titles for things like that in a future season, like the first to run across the crystal shard of Gozark?
Oh, how cool would that be? I mean, that would be like total bragging rights. We all like to be unique, right? I was the first one to discover. I mean, when we started on New Legacy, our goal as a group was to build a township and be the first guild to place a guild house. That, be the first. So, yeah, absolutely. Those titles, I discovered XYZ. People would love that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that your player community was in fact acknowledged for your township in an official newsletter.
Yeah.
I recall
Yeah.
that was great to see it, and the organization involved in getting yourselves together and placing those houses together as a community. I think that was really, really cool to see.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun getting everybody. We actually coordinated that in our Discord and said, all right, everybody meet this day at this time. And we waited until everybody had enough loyalty. We helped everybody get enough loyalty, waited till everybody had it. And then as a group, we placed. And it was another one of those community things where, if somebody didn't have enough gold, somebody else did. And we just all pitched in and we built a town.
That's a great segue to season 2. And one of the things that I've heard from, your fellow guildmate Kaz and others is a real desire to see guild houses serve more as a hub for player towns, like the one you were able to artificially create through your coordination together as a player community. My citadel for the Wyvern's Lair player community sits here south of Trinsic on its own in a desolate grassland. Yeah. It's a little depressing. I'm sure it would have been so fun for the members of the Wyvern's Lair community to be able to place around the guild house and create that sense of township and togetherness as a player community / guild.
Yeah, I think we would have also, for our group, I think we would have gone for the bigger guild house if there was that township around it, if it was a central meeting place. And then you could build the player houses around it. I think that is the one drawback of the guild house is, like you said, it's just kind of out here in the middle of nowhere by itself. Yeah, what's really the reason to come here if you've built a town where everybody's houses are all together and, you're kind of running in and out? Do I really want to run across the map to go to a guild house? I think the guild house could have had a lot more usefulness if it was the center of the community. I would love to see that in season 2.
Yeah, and I would also like to see, because having a guild house in the first season of New Legacy, apart from the bragging rights of being able to progress in the guild experience system for larger and larger and grander guild houses, it's almost a burden to players to take part. And it goes back to you and your community, as large and active as you are, to decide not to move over to the next level of Guild House, the Fortress, which requires even more upkeep than the Guild Citadel. There's such little in the way of what the guild system gives back to people who take part in it. The only thing that I can think of that could be even partially useful to to players taking part in the guild system is the guild resource bank. But even then, crafting is not, for many reasons, and it's going to be I'm sure, a part of our conversation for season 2. It's not a significant part of season 1. So there's not a real great utility to even having the guild resource bank. Beyond that, I can't really think of anything else. Myself as the guild leader, for the Wyvern's Lair, there's a benefit to me to having an active and large player community. It means that this structure that we're in right now can be upgraded to larger and larger things that, unfortunately only I have really the ability to interact with. And so I really wish that there was more benefit to a guild member to be part of a guild, if that makes sense. And one part of our, one possible reward is what you've expressed here, is the ability to place around a guild citadel. That could be one way of sort of giving back to players who choose to opt into the guild system, right?
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Slurms.
Yeah, I just want to say, I don't think that the developers in any way see the guild system as a success with the way that it has. I don't think they even probably see the segregation of where you can place as a success. This is an example of where the theory sounds fantastic, but once you see the implementation, it's a disaster. Because it has isolated people. It's with limiting to 7x7 housing, you haven't allowed people to showcase items. I would treasure hunt and search for antiquities so much more if I could showcase them. If I could just put up an L shape or a patio and decorate it. I'm not saying I need a castle. There's 30 total castle spots in the entire of Felucia, or 26. I can't remember. Someone mapped it out at one point. I remember in the back of my head. There's not a ton. So not everyone's going to get a castle. I understand that 100%. So if they had enough active players to where the guild housing existed, having them in the locations where you could put a castle and being able to put, okay, there's going to be 20 active guilds. Let's cordon off these areas so that we can put those 20 castles. Beautiful in theory, absolutely understandable. But I can't imagine there'd be too many guilds with the current system that would want to put up a castle if it meant that you had to do 2,000 quests a month with your guild mates to try to refresh it. That castle's going to collapse.
Yeah, in a hurry.
So while it all sounds fantastic and very, very great, and this is what I do love about seasons, they get to try stuff.
Right.
You could never do this on a production server, but you get to try it on a seasonal. I love that. But I do think one of their biggest issues that they have to come back to is housing. I would love for crafters to play a role in housing.
Yeah.
I would love for crafters to help you build stuff, or once you level up and you have access to, you start out in a tent or a 7x7, but you can level up and maybe you get access to different zones that you can place your house in. So you want to keep people isolated or this, that, or the other. That's fine. You don't want them to just randomly place in a forest.
Slurms, hold on one second. Before we go into crafting, Anne did have thoughts about the guild system and, being
trying to pull it back.
Oh, okay.
So just saying the whole leveling of houses, I would love to see similar to the guild system. I think that's an aspect that worked. I think leveling up the housing for the guild was beautiful. I just think the requirement of how many you had to do to keep it upkeep, the location of where the guilds could be were not necessarily great. Touching on the community, I think that's one thing that's been reiterated ad nauseum and should be continued to be repeated, because if it gets missed, you could literally have people just staying on production and not play New Legacy Season 2, which would hurt me because the only reason I'm playing UO right now is for New Legacy. I'm looking forward to Season 2 a lot, which is why I've tried to been vocal and help people. When I see people in trouble, I'm like, yeah, let's go. So I like that aspect, but I would like to see that community engagement. I would like to see that guild engagement. I would love for people to, get around the wishing well for Friday night hunts and be like, all right, we're instead of the water cooler, it's the wishing well, and that's where we're meeting. And, everything is built around this wishing well kind of thing, or, center staple that allows for placement. Because we've seen that they allow for placement in areas. Wyvern is very familiar with what is allowed to be placed and what can't be because of the difficulties of placing his current guild house, and he wanted it to be closer to Trinsic, but was unable to. So they have very interesting things with the guild housing, and I like that they tried it, but they definitely need to go back to the drawing board, I think, a little bit. And then, sorry, back to you, Anne.
Well said, Slurm.
Yeah, no, absolutely 100% agree with everything you said. I would like to see the whole guild concept maybe rebalanced a little bit. One of the things that we ran into, and I know I kind of understand the reason for it, but we ran into a problem where we had to actually create a separate guild to ally because we couldn't fit everyone.
Oh, yeah, right.
One
Yeah,
guild.
I remember those limitations, 30 members, right? Yeah.
Yeah, until you leveled it up. And, I understand, maybe you don't want to start off with a guild 100 strong. I don't know why. I mean, I think you could. The whole point is community here.
And it should be with Season 2, bringing people back together. All these guilds that built up to 60, 70 players or something like that, now you're going to say in Season 2, sorry, you can't be in my guild right now.
Yeah.
That's going to hurt a lot. So I do agree, you're going on a really strong point. Sorry to interrupt, but that's absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no, so imagine, if you have this strong guild, you're able to get to a guild house. You can place that guild house as the center of your town. You've got this community, you're really starting to engage and provide a better depth of experience. You're diving into the world. You've got a town, and maybe you've got one person's house as your little blacksmith shop, and another person's house as your inscription hub. So you start kind of specializing, and really, I think some players could do a fantastic job with building a player-run town. An actual, in concept, you have the hub, and then you have the little buildings, and they all have a purpose, and then you have, just your houses for display. I love to display unique things, and to Slurm's point, I can't do it in a 7x7, but I think there's a lot more that could be done with the guild mechanics. And, I know we're going to get into crafters, but the guild resource bank is really good for crafters if crafters had a purpose.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think that was probably my biggest disappointment in New Legacy, was the way crafters, I was expecting more for crafters.
Yeah, I think Parallax, very early on in our conversations with Parallax. And once again, big heartfelt thanks to Chironics and Parallax for stepping forward and making themselves available for conversations with the player communities as they have, both on my platform and elsewhere with friends like Epic Loot Gaming. But I think Parallax acknowledged that there could be more done with crafting, and to just sort of feedback into what you've shared here, Slurms and Anne. Moving forward to season 2, my hopes would be to see an adjustment to upkeep, because it is onerous, especially for smaller player communities like ours, for example, here at the Wyvern's Lair. And we're not the only example of a player community that consists of maybe 5 or 4 active players, right? This is a commonality, I think, throughout Ultima Online, of small groups of friends that take part in this content. You do, of course, have examples of much larger player communities like Kindred Order of Loyalty and Friday Night Hunt, but it's prohibitive for smaller groups to make any kind of meaningful progress right now in the guild system because of the upkeep. I like to see an adjustment in terms of the experience needed to level up your guilds. There's been, I think, I'm not so sure where you are in terms of your. You actually know. I know that you probably have enough guild experience to place a fortress and ask our friends at Cool have, but that's few and far between, right? So, what does it say about the guild system? The fact that only maybe 2 guilds over the course of a year have been able to reach the fortress level. I think that shows that there needs to be an adjustment there. Adjust upkeep, and then tie crafting into both player housing and also guild houses. Like, what if you were to aspire towards a citadel or fortress, you would need to involve guild crafters in a substantive way. That could be really exciting. Right. It could give meaning to them going out and doing what they enjoy doing as part of their Ultima Online experience, which is mining or lumbering, etc.
And I think something else that kind of plays into a lot of New Legacy, the guild leveling, the player leveling, when you think about the content they're putting in on production, which is a lot of fun for those of us who play both. You're splitting time. You've got people like Slurms who they play New Legacy solo, but there are a lot of us that play in both spots.
That's brilliant. Thank you for pointing that out. This is so important for them to hear.
Yeah, trying to keep up the upkeep on New Legacy while still participating in the new content here and the new content on production. I think it has to kind of be balanced a little bit. So I'd be interested to see them look at that and kind of what that looks like.
That's a great shout, Anne. In fact, for the first time in the history of the Wyvern's Lair player community here in New Legacy, I'm looking at our upkeep for the Citadel, and it's getting a little tight. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it is where it is right now because of Publish 120 on production. And so, I applaud the developers for cycling publishes between New Legacy and production, because they want to encourage production players to engage in New Legacy publishes, and they want New Legacy players to engage with production publishes. And I'm glad that they're giving space for that to happen. But there is a mechanical consequence for New Legacy players if they spend 2 months having fun on production. Their player homes fall, their guild citadels fall. That's not fun.
Right, exactly. And I'm with you. I mean, I applaud the developers. I think, especially, in recent months, they've listened, they've taken great feedback, and, keeping up 2 completely separate systems, New Legacy and production, I certainly applaud them. And, I do think they're open to feedback, and I'm going to be interested to see what they do with it.
I think, as we all, and just as you said, I really think that this remains a really exciting and fresh time for Ultima Online and Ultima Online players, and it's really to a credit to our small but mighty team of developers over at Broadsword Online Gaming, who've done such a great job of carrying the torch for the first ever commercially successful sandbox MMO in Ultima Online. Any before we step away from this conversation, we got about 4 minutes left. Last hope, any last thoughts or hopes for season 2 that you would like to express here before we wrap up this podcast discussion?
I'd love for them to look into more skills being used, but not just simply like, oh, we're gonna add necromancy. That's just magery, that kind of thing. I put up a whole thing about stealing and about how that could add a different level of PvP and stuff, and I'd love to see that. Or not PvP, pardon, PvE instead of being PvP. With how you could implement going out and hunting people's inventories, or pardon, NPC inventories, versus using it for like what it used to be used in Felucia back in the day to steal whatever. So that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, I'm hoping for love for the crafters. I'm really hoping. I want to see the crafters become again a integral part of the community. Back, in the old days, crafters were super important. They made the best gear. They, you had to have, which here you have to have crafters to repair. So that's good. There is a need for them. But I would love to see them given a little more love. And I think one thing I'd love to see for the crafters is please give me some way to defend myself if you're going to have stuff attacking me in the middle of nowhere. I can't defend myself and heal, so I die. But I die a lot anyway, so maybe that's a moot point.
As for myself, I think the developers are on the right path here. I think that I wouldn't do anything more with the quest paths, the narrative paths. I think that as they've been implemented, they serve their purpose, they're fun, and I wouldn't want the developers to spend valuable time reworking them just for the sake of reworking them. I'm fine running that same exact narrative path for season 2 as I did for season 1 for this character. With the exception, of course, going back to Slurms, of, let's say, new advanced skills that don't currently exist in season 1. For example, let's say they introduce chivalry or necromancy. I'd be very excited to have to do an advanced skill quest path for those new skills that they may introduce for season 2. I do
want to give a shout out, personally, my opinion, for the skill gain, the way they've worked that on New Legacy. I am a huge fan of the shortened path to skill gain. It's not just, go out and cast a fireball over and over and over. There was actually a narrative to follow for it. I have been a big fan of the way they implemented skill training here. So,
man, I agree with you, Anne. I just thought it was absurdity that people were complaining about moving away from a system that quickly wasn't really engaged with as the developers had first intended, right? So they just assumed players would go out in the world, do the thing, skill up, right? And that's not, in fact, what happened eventually with Ultima Online. You'd sit in your house and you'd cast the same fireball over and over again until you were a grandmaster. And any new player...
Toothpick in the keyboard and walk away.
Exactly. And any new players learning that's what they had to do, that's like a quit moment for a lot of people. So for them to find an actually exciting way for you to quickly, cap out your character and get involved in content, that's definitely one of the hugest strengths of New Legacy, and developers, I think, recognize that and are going to remain committed to, this new way of for players to progress their characters. So, going back to what I was saying, I do think that they do need to expand what players can do outside of publishes for New Legacy. I would like to see more legendary foes, so the rotation grows in size, and you can make choices between which legendary foe you want to go after. At times, I think the 5 that we have are great. I think it's a good start. I'd love to see more. I'd also love to see system announces once legendary foes do actually, respawn in the game world. So we're not relying on world chat to find out if something is up or not. In the same way we get those system announces for Blackthorn's Dungeon, coming online. I would like to see stuff done with the seas, boating, for example, for the second season. So motivation, additional legendary foes, and most importantly, motivations for the player to explore the game world and also take to the seas. That would be very exciting for me for season 2, because I do think that New Legacy was hurt with how limited the initial experience was for the first several months. When New Legacy launched at the end of the fall, we had to deal with several months of just the same 5 legendary foes before Publish 2 hit in April of this past year. And I think that we lost players that would have either have stayed with New Legacy or would have gone on to production because of that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts before we walk away about a challenge that I have faced as someone who's tried to sort of grow a community here on New Legacy. It's been very exciting for myself as a player to take part in the first season of New Legacy. I was very excited to be here at the start of something new for the first time in 20 plus years for Ultima Online. And it's been a privilege showcasing that to the best of my ability and time that I have available as a content creator through my platform. And I have probably the most visible beacon for New Legacy on, let's say, both, the usual suspects you can think of on the World Wide Web, the official forums, and elsewhere. Obviously, I have this presence on YouTube and Twitch, and because of that, throughout the entirety of season 1, I've had a great deal of players join the Wyvern's Lair player community as Ultima Online New Legacy tourists. And I've also had a great deal of players essentially not leave what the guild is, but essentially they would just drift away. And I think that for me, it's been an interesting experience as someone who's been trying to sort of build an organic player community here in New Legacy, because unlike Friday Night Hunt or unlike Kindred Order of Loyalty, I didn't come here with long-standing Ultima Online player veterans to establish something here in New Legacy. Most of Friday Night Hunt, most of Kindred Order of Loyalty, of course, with some exceptions, these are players who have been playing UO for many, many years and plan to continue to do so. So I think it's been interesting for me to see just that churn and the inability to retain players through the experience of New Legacy. And I'm just curious as to hear your thoughts about what that may be, or what I could do to sort of make this player community more solidly footed for players joining the Wyvern's Lair.
I think the interesting thing about building the community is it's a mix of your veterans and the newer returning players. And I think the veterans that you do have, if you have 1 or 2 really strong vets that are community minded, that have the heart for helping returning and new players, part of the challenge for returning or a new player is all of the systems, learning what's good gear, what's a good tactic, what do you need to survive in this game. Maybe it's a little bit of gold, and maybe it's a better weapon. I think the key to it is having your veterans paying attention to the new players. One of the things that we do on the Friday Night Hunt on Catskills especially is if we have a player that's new to Catskills or returning, we have a group of guys that the very first thing they do is pull up the paper doll and take a look at the suit. What are they wearing? How can we help them improve? Because it can be a struggle if you're not outfitted, if you're not doing damage, if you're not seeing rewards. That's when we tend to lose people. They get frustrated and bored. So having, 1 or 2 in your group who kind of have that heart to look out for the newer players and help bring them up, because what you tend to see is as you bring those players up, they pay it forward. They bring other players up. And that's kind of the philosophy that we have is we don't keep score. We're not asking for anybody to pay us anything back. We're asking for people to pay it forward. Take a look at your new player that comes in. What do they need? And don't make it a handout. Don't make them feel beholding, but make them feel empowered and stress, pay it forward. Help the next player that comes along. But you really kind of see the excitement as they get better in the game. If you can give them a better weapon, a better piece of armor, a better piece of advice, even, it really kind of keeps them engaged, and just being there to answer questions, and whatever question they ask, that somebody jumps in and answers them. That's kind of the biggest thing for building the community and keeping it.
Thank you, Anne. Slurms, thoughts from your end. As someone who also has a foot in this player community yourself.
Yeah, I've never built a community, but being a teacher who has to build, like community engagement at the local level, it's always how do you get them back? Why is there a return? And I think you do a pretty good job at that, like, hey, on your outings and stuff like that, this is why we're here, this is what we're doing. So I think you do a great job with that aspect. And I really think that one of the big things that people return for is the community. And I think that that's one thing that overall I think has to be cultivated also by New Legacy and UO itself.
Yeah.
So I think the only thing that you could possibly do is maybe try to reach out, collab with people who, do video game reviews. You were really excited when that person did the UO, but they did it for something that we can't talk about, with that regards. Anyone can find it, Ultima Online, what is Ultima Online today? You'll find it on YouTube. But with that being said,
that's a great shout. Yeah.
Person was really good at being able to say, hey, this is being done. This is how they're playing it. This is what they're doing. And that there's always people looking for that kind of collab. And it's hard to kind of go, is this okay to do? Because it's going outside the kind of comfort realm. But you want to know what? Sometimes those break into and get people playing. I saw recently YouTube where a guy said he was playing the most dead game that exists, and he logged in, and it's a game that existed in, I think, 99 or 98, so it came out a little after UO, but it is a dead game. There's like 3 or 4 people total playing it, and similarly to UO, where people have 4 or 5 accounts in order to do what they need to do. This game had like religions in it for like Norse gods kind of thing, or maybe it wasn't Norse god, whatever gods they had for the game, and it was like this really, really interesting system. And when he started playing that, one of the players reached out to him and said, hey, thank you for putting like a light on this. I want to talk to you. And it kind of grew from there. And some of that person's YouTube followers went and started playing that game because it is an interesting game. It's very unique. I wish from the life of me, I wish I remember the content developer, but it was the algorithm from YouTube that fed it to me. But it was so neat. And it was a game that no one had looked at in probably 20 years. So much so that the players on the game were like, holy crap, it's a new player. I haven't seen a new player in 10 years or something like that. It's been years. I might be over exaggerating, but it had been such a long time that they didn't think he was a new player. They thought it was just someone else who had an old account who was making a character again and was going to power level it. And over the course of the month, the whole community came together, like the 4 or 5 players that played. It was really cool. But that was someone who would never do that. And I thought that was cool because their community was large enough to really put a spotlight on it for other people who aren't in that gaming sphere. So that'd be the only thing. And it's hard to sometimes do collabs. So I can only imagine, reaching out and doing that. But that's the only thing, is putting eyeballs on it in New Legacy Ultima, where people go like, oh, I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's well said. And I will say that there's only, so a couple of things there. One, I think you're right. I could think of reaching out to content creators who may be interested in checking out New Legacy, who have covered Ultima Online in the past, and inviting them to have a look at it with myself, or at least encourage
people who've played Ultima. I think it's just general people who do random mix-up games, like where they're like, "Hey, I'm doing a game review." Pull them in. Hey, you can play on a new character without paying for a single penny of it.
That's true.
Just see.
Yeah, that's actually one of the great things about how the developers have approached New Legacy. You do not need a subscription to create character on New Legacy. There are limitations, but they are surmountable, and you can still have a satisfying time. As many of the the guild members of the Wyvern's Lair have taken that approach and have had a fun time experiencing New Legacy with myself and yourself, Slurms. I also think that it could be helpful for me to actually show like what exactly is New Legacy in terms of like progressing a character through a quest path or introducing legendary foes to outside audiences through really sort of focused videos. So maybe a little bit more storytelling specific to the unique features and systems of New Legacy as a content creator in the future. But I also think there's only so much that we can do as community organizers, yourself and you, Slurms, and myself. I think part of it is, of course, the actual experience of the game, as you alluded to. And so I think that I'm curious to see what retention will look like for future seasons. I think this has been a really good first draft. And I don't mean to say that everyone has bounced off New Legacy. You certainly haven't, Slurms. I haven't. We definitely have a handful of people who are really devoted to the idea of a seasonal shard experience in the context of Ultima Online. And we see new people showing up on the New Legacy and official Ultima Online Discord every day, in part thanks to what they're hearing about New Legacy. So I think this is a really promising first draft. And I hope that the conversation, I'm so incredibly grateful to both of you for making the time for this, because the truth of the matter is season 2 is likely being decided right now by the developers. And so I'm hoping that when they listen to this conversation, if they listen to this conversation, they take inspiration from your feedback here and yourself, Slurms. And I hope that it charts a path for them on how they could improve season 2. And this is not to say that they have to craft the game around your opinions, but I do think you, Anne, represent a large number of dedicated Ultima Online players, and you have a decades-long background as a community member yourself here. And Slurms, you put in a lot of thought and passion and have made that that clear through what you've shared on Discord and also the official forum. So you have been, I think, an important voice and perspective for New Legacy as well. So thank you again both for your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I can't wait to share it with the New Legacy community soon / Ultima Online player community.
Thank you for having us. I've enjoyed it. It's been fun discussing all the aspects of New Legacy, and I'm excited for season 2.
I am.
I'm excited to see how they end season 1. To be honest, I am just chomping at the bit to see how they pull this off.
Me too. I'm looking forward to publish
the aspiration is push the limit for season 2. Like,
yes,
as I could summit, push it, check it. Don't. You can always roll it back. Push it. Let's see some fun and crazy stuff going.
Yeah.
What's the worst that's going to happen? It's 1 year. It's a season.
Yep.
Yes. And I think Parallax and Chironics are right there with you. I think they really wanted an outlet for their own creativity as developers where they could take creative risks with the design. And so hopefully we see that in season 2. So once again, huzzah to the good team at Broadsword. You do great things for this great MMO, and we're looking forward to seeing what you have up your sleeves for us in the future, whether it's Published 3 or season 2.
Yep. Thanks, everything.
Thanks a lot.